Welcome, everyone, to DEI After 5, the show that focuses on topics across diversity, equity, and inclusion with some of the brightest minds in the industry. Here's your hostess, inclusive culture curator and coach, Sacha Thompson.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of DEI After 5. Okay, shocker, right? There's an attack on diversity, equity, and inclusion that is taking place. And even recently, the Society for Human Resource Management made the announcement that they are removing equity from their work and only focusing on inclusion and diversity. Yeah, anyway. So we are going to talk about what is going on in this space. Is DEI a dirty word? What is happening? Because it is not just happening in the United States. It's happening globally. It's happening in our corporations. It's happening in our schools. It's taking over. And so today, my guest is Jermaine Stanley, who is the CEO of the Stanley Consulting Group. And we are going to talk about what is happening in the industry. What can we do? What is the future of this work? So Jermaine, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sacha. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited about this.
I am too. So for anyone who may not know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, Jermaine Stanley, founder of Stanley Consulting Group. Yes, I'm a tech leader by default, but this whole thing regarding culture, diversity, equity, inclusion, all those things that we're talking about, they have been a part of my career all my life. So I am doing something that's leading me towards my passion. In the year 2020, things changed, and I refocused from cybersecurity and IT risk to using my platform and my influence to amplify the conversation around this. As you recall, Sacha, a lot of companies in 2020, they say, hey, we're going to pledge X amount of dollars to do this, this, and this. And here we are today talking about DEI as a dirty word and removing equity from the equation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating what has happened in less than 5 years. It's a pendulum shift for sure.
Yes.
So, when you and I were speaking before, and you and I have actually been on another panel together. So, this fight against diversity, equity, and inclusion isn't new. It is something that has been going on from the beginning of time. But why does this feel different?
Well, it's a couple of reasons why, right? So when we think about DEI as a dirty word, I actually had a workshop that I ran 2 consecutive months because it was so popular. And it is under attack. But typically, when we have changes in our financial circumstances in our country, when we have a political shift, like we're in an election year, these types of programs and offerings and directions that companies want to take, they come under scrutiny, as you know, and either they're going to be defunded or removed entirely. So it's not surprising that right now this has become such a hot topic.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because when we talk about what is happening politically, when we talk about these attacks, at first it was critical race theory and how that was the big bad wolf. Now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion is the big bad wolf. But when I take a look at what is happening, DEI is not what is being attacked about. DEI is not the work itself. It seems like it's the word, it's the threat of the work.
Yes.
And it's been almost exchanged for, I said this to someone the other day, right? Like DEI is almost like the new N-word.
Yes.
Because it has become this euphemism for anything that's supporting Blackness. And people forget about the other aspects of diversity, equity, and inclusion that are impacted by this. And so as someone that's in this work, as someone that, as you were doing your workshops, what are some of the questions that are coming up from people around, like, where do we go from here?
Yes, yes. When people question, ask that one question, where do we go from here? I remind folks that diversity is, when you're in a company, diversity is inherent because we come from different walks of life, different parts of the world, and we work for a company. So by default, you're going to have diversity. So to think that the D is dead, which, if you have Sherm, it's still there, but that's another topic. But the idea is that it shouldn't be a dirty word because you're going to have diversity, right? But companies are also shifting towards, and this is what I say in the workshop, doing it without saying it, right? So a lot of companies are shifting towards embedding some of these practices without really making a big announcement, so to speak. So it kind of becomes more integrated. Even you're seeing some companies who are changing the names and the titles of the positions in the departments or the teams, so that it doesn't seem like a work. So those are some of the adjustments from a corporate perspective. I say this as well. I can be in a room full of white men and have diversity. I can be in a room full of women and have diversity, right? It's just by default. So that's going to happen. The equity and inclusion piece, which again, we'll talk about, that's another discussion about equity. That's where the rubber meets the road, right? So to speak. I'm not totally in disagreement with Sherm on this, but you still need to do things that allow folks to feel that their voice is heard, that they're valued, no matter who they are, what they represent, et cetera, right? So I take that approach when that question comes up to get folks to thinking that, wait a minute, this is not it's not all about race, and I think that's what's happened. The other part of this that I say when we talk about DEI as a dirty word is, and I think both sides of this conversation are at fault, right? We're both at fault, right? Meaning the folks who weaponized it to say it's a bad thing, it's not fair to everyone else, as well as the people who are those marginalized or underrepresented groups of people. Both sides have weaponized this term, right? But if we take a step back, to what I said just a second ago, that it's for everyone. All these programs going way back when they first started, they were designed for everyone in the company, if you think about it that way, right? So I like to try to get people to open their minds about the fact that it doesn't have to be this way, right? Because it's designed for everybody.
Yeah, it's interesting because I believe that the diversity piece, the diversity and inclusion piece, is really focused on everyone. The equity piece for me is like removing barriers and providing support. Not everybody needs the same thing. And so if you are providing support, providing accommodations, providing opportunities for people that may not have access to them in other ways, right? That's the equity work. And I think that's the piece that people are fighting back against, because it feels unfair that people are getting certain things that they can't get. But do you need it? Right. And so that's the piece that I think people need to start to question is, what is it that you need in order to be successful? If you don't need those things, then you don't need them. Right. But if somebody else needs them in order to be successful, be it an accommodation, be it an interpreter, right, whatever it is, then, okay, now we're setting you up for success. And I think that's part of the misnomer, is that equity and equality are the same thing, and they're not. And so when I'm hearing this pushback, yes, I think that, these things are built for everyone, but there also needs to be a piece of it where Jermaine may need some things that Sacha doesn't need, or vice versa.
Right.
And so how do we do that in a way where everyone has access to what they need in order for us to get to that more equitable place. And so, when the decision to remove equity comes out, to me feels very all lives matter. Like,
You
yeah,
know, yeah,
they do.
yeah, and I like what you said there. It's not a one size fits all. We know
Right.
this, and so Stanley Consulting Group last year during our New Age of DEI conference that we held in the Greater Washington D.C. area, we introduced our concept called tuning the dial on DEI.
Mm.
And as I mentioned earlier on, that companies dedicated so much money, pledged so much money to just let's go fix it. They didn't know what they're going to try to fix.
Right.
But when you talk about not everyone needing the same thing or needing something, that's where that concept comes into mind, right? So prior to the pandemic and the George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and all those other unfortunate situations, companies might have focused on a certain aspect of their culture,
Right.
right? Well, then they said, well, we got to make sure our underrepresented and marginalized people are getting what they need. So they were adjusting things, right? So tuning the dial allows you to look at your whole, culture or your ecosystem, as far as your people, and understand, okay, what areas should we adjust? Now, do we do it at the macro level, organizational wide, or do we do it individually, right, for individual people? Those are those little tweaks and diagnostics that companies can take. So for me, I'm looking at it from an engineering perspective. I have couple of engineering degrees, so I look at things of how can we look at it, fix it, adjust and things that as we go along. So I totally agree with what you just said about everyone doesn't need the same, right? But companies have to be wise enough to understand that. We are individuals, we are different. And I think there are some good companies that are doing good things. If you look at any of the indexes out there, those companies who do it well, they are at the top of the list all the time. Think of American Airlines, think of Accenture, think of a few other big companies but they have the resources to do that as well.
Yeah. And I love that concept of tuning the dial, because it allows you to do that fine tuning and focus in on the areas that need it.
Yes.
But you're not stuck on that one station, right? Like you can change to other stations, you can move. And it just made me think about, I was working with some clients not too long ago where we were doing like an assessment around psychological safety across the organization. Yeah. And I've shared this story with, the audience before, in that we did it across demographics. We were looking at it by demographics. And I asked the question, I was like, okay, so what is going on with your Latino men that are over the age of 55? And they were like, what do you mean? I'm like, because their psychological safety is through the roof. Like they are having the best life. Like they're just enjoying life. The next group down, the worst group, were white men that were in their 20s. And so I started asking some questions around, what type of work have you all been doing? And, we've been focusing on our women and our Black employees. Okay. And interestingly enough, the women and Black employees' psychological safety was about the same. So then you had these two outliers. That's a different conversation now, because you can't just pat yourselves on the back and say, oh, yeah, we did the work. You have two groups that are having very different experiences, right? And so it's like, what is happening with this older group of men and what is happening with this younger group of men? And so it created that opportunity to tune the dial, to check in and see, okay, what is really happening here? And what they ended up doing was creating some mentorship groups across gender and across ethnicity and across generations, right? So it allowed them to really think about, how are we tapping into who we have in a way that, again, is equitable, right? People feel like they're getting what they need, and giving people the opportunity to not feel like, oh, that's just a program for that group. Yeah. So even though we looked at specific groups, we were able to step back and create an opportunity, to your point earlier, that was open for everyone so that everyone could benefit in a way that was meaningful to them. And so I think, when you talk about tuning that dial, that's part of that work too, is actually looking at the data in a way that allows you to do that.
Yes, I love that, and I support that, right? And the thing that I'm impressed the most about those companies, some of those companies that I mentioned that are doing it well, they have metrics
Yes.
and they make them public, right? So it's not done in a vacuum. I've heard stories, and you probably heard stories. Companies, they keep that under lock and key. They don't share that information, not even with their employees. And the fact that the example that you gave with the outliers, that they one identified this, which meant that somebody's looking at the numbers, somebody's looking at the data. Check, great, you're doing well. Then you implement something to help those two outlying groups, right? As outliers. And what does that do if I'm an employee? Let's put ourselves in the shoes or seat of that employee that's impacted in one of those groups. Now my leadership, my company cares about who I am, not because I'm talented, and I bring something to the table as far as, a technical skill or legal skill or whatever skill they need, but me as a human being, me as a person, right? And that well-being of the mentality of men in general. We just came out of men's mental health awareness month, right? So that's important, and I'm not surprised. But again, this is how we get down that rabbit hole where some of this might become a little adversarial or weaponized because one group is feeling like they're being left out. And again, back to what I was saying about companies throwing money and resources, not really knowing what the target was. They ordered, and we've talked about this before, and you've heard this in your circles, when folks, and I'm doing air quotes, over compensate. And I think that's what happened. If I read the tea leaves, I think that's what happened in the example. They overcompensated and totally forgot the rest of the organization. And again, tuning the dial or taking an approach, something similar to that, will allow you to, cover your bases.
Yeah. And I think what was important with that, like, I was in tech for 10 years, so I consider myself part techie. I'm not an engineer by any stretch of the imagination. But, it's really looking at the data and looking at it from different angles and perspectives. Because for some people, you can manipulate the data to make it tell you the things that you want it to say, right? But how do you really look at this data and step back to say, okay, what is the story here? What are some of the gaps? What are some of the opportunities? Where are we seeing some patterns that we can now either start to continue or to realize these are not working in our best interest, these patterns? And so now we're looking at systems. Now we're looking at infrastructure. Now we're looking at other ways in order to make these shifts and changes. And so I think that is so important in this work. And it's not just checking a box. And, to your point around what was happening in 2020, it was a lot of box checking. It was a lot of, we did these 82 workshops and we're good. Behaviors didn't change, systems didn't change, processes didn't change. And so it's easy to say DEI hasn't done anything because it didn't do the hard work of making those systemic changes. But to your point, there are quite a few organizations that have done that work. So, not poo-pooing on everyone, but there's some out there.
Can I add one thing before you move on to the next topic here? So from the research that we've done, right, and the people that we've spoken with, and just knowing how organizational change takes place. Think of the Titanic in the bathtub, trying to turn the Titanic in the bathtub. That's a huge undertaking. A lot of these companies, I think, and this is my opinion, no one else's, is that they threw all this money at the situation, all the resources at the situation, and they didn't really give it a whole lot of thought, like I said, on the target that they were trying to, what they were trying to fix. So the issue, then becomes, okay, we're frustrated now because we are not seeing the results. But I tell folks when I talk to different companies, I say, look, 2 to 3 years, you might start to see some incremental improvement, but really 5 years into your program, you're probably going to start to see some changes. So the examples that I gave earlier around those companies that are doing it really well, they've been doing this stuff for a long time. We're talking decades.
Yeah.
So we have to, as consultants that we are in this space, we have to, level set their expectations that this is not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time.
Right.
Yeah.
But you made an excellent point in that if you have not determined your target, how are you then to say something is not successful?
Right. Absolutely. Right. That's where the metrics come in, setting those baselines, those targets. Now the metrics start to make sense.
Yeah.
There you go.
So, we talked about DEI as a dirty word. We're seeing organizations kind of stepping away, changing the vocabulary. I've done several shows on, what if DEI goes away? My take on that is if those 3 letters go away, the work still needs to get done, right? The work will still continue to happen. What do you see is the future of this work? Well,
doing it without saying it. That's the first thing I said about DEI as a dirty word. It's not going away. And a good friend of mine uses a phrase, the D is not dead, right? Mm. And Sacha, you're on LinkedIn like I am, and you're on SHRM like I am. You're going to see, I can't believe how many jobs, openings, positions for Chief Diversity Officer, VP of People and Culture. They're still hiring for these positions. Mm-hmm. And the companies know that this work still needs to be done. And our country, is not going to be the same. The world's not going to be the same post-COVID. Okay. We're in a virtual, hybrid, in some cases, workforce environment at this point. Right. Yeah. So you have to be able to make those adjustments. So the work still needs to be done. And the work needed to be done prior to COVID. It's always been there. And if we go back in time, and I talked a little bit about this during the workshop, the DEI is a dirty word workshop, in that if you go back to like late 2008, 2009, right before the recession, again, there's an economic shift. A lot of those programs back then, the cultural programs, they didn't call it that back then. They met a demise. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the work has always been in the background. Right. It's just, it was amplified so much during the COVID years. And now we're coming out of that. I'll say it, DEI is not a dirty word. Do it without saying it, though, is the way to go. That's where a lot of, folks. And then for me, for what we've done at Stanley Consulting Group to help with this is we've been focused more on the inclusive side of things. So we've got a inclusive leadership workshop series that we have been providing to our customers, right? And it's a series of workshops from the foundational pieces all the way through to the more advanced aspects, including technology's role, men as allies, et cetera, et cetera. But folks like us, you and I, we have a key role in keeping the conversation, keeping the momentum in a good way. And we're not weaponizing it, right? We're saying we're inclusive of all, and we want to help all. And we want to make sure our organizations, our cultures, our societies can benefit from these different practices, right? It's enough of us in this space to get that done.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love the doing it without saying it. What I say is I'm sneaking in the DEI vegetables.
There you go.
I was like,
I love it. Let me write that one down too.
we're gonna sneak it in. We're gonna sneak it in. You don't know it's broccoli, but it's broccoli in there. But that's how it is, right? You make sure that the systems are inclusive. You model the behavior. You bring a lens of equity into the work and making sure everyone's voice is heard and seen and people feel valued and all of that. And so from the beginning of the equity equation, that's how we've approached this work. We don't always have to say diversity, equity, and inclusion, but if we're working toward the outcomes of DEI, then it'll all get kind of pulled in there and again, sneaking in those vegetables.
There you go. I love it.
So Jermaine, for those who are probably curious, what are the things that you do to fill your cup? Like, how do you take care of yourself as you're doing this work?
Wow, this is great. So I love the question, and you could probably relate to this. You're drawn to what your passion is, right? And me as a just about 6'5" Afro Latino, this is what I talk about when I get my keynote, from Detroit, Michigan. I felt awkward, right? And now that I'm on the other side of my career, so to speak, I've been at this for a good while. My passion is about helping that next generation, right, of leaders, men and women alike, right? And I get it. That helps fill my cup. It keeps me motivated. And I don't look at it as, oh, this is just so big. Yeah. It's really big. We know this, right? But I don't look at it that way. Whatever I can do to help society in my way, I find gratitude in that. What keeps me moving is I work out 5 times a week. I meditate every day. And last I checked, I think I was like 960 some days or something like that. It's pretty,
wow.
Yes, consecutive. And that helps with the mental aspects because, we're not always at our best selves, and we need something to help offset when we get stressed and things like that. So the working out, being physically fit, and the meditation, along with the gratitude that you gain from just helping others benefit from the different changes a company can make, not only within their workforce, but also in the communities that they actually have a presence in. Because once we leave, when folks leave their offices, where do they go? They go home. They go to their communities. Yep. So if the company is pouring in to those people, and experts like ourselves are helping the companies do that, I think that's a win for everybody. What do you think?
Listen, I have been talking about the true work of DEI is what you do after 5. It is what you do when you get home. It's when you're in your communities, at your church, in your sororities and fraternities, all of those things. And so that is the true testament to what this work is and what it can do. So I appreciate that. So Jermaine, if folks wanted to get in contact with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
Yes, they can hit me at my email address. That's really direct, jstanley@stanleyconsults.com. They can hit me there. I'm also on LinkedIn. Our company is on LinkedIn at LinkedIn at Stanley Consults, I believe. I think that's it. Yes. And then I have a personal LinkedIn account as well. They're kind of interconnected, so you can hit me there. I'm very responsive to either one of those methods. I'm also on, formerly known as Twitter, X. They want to reach me there. They got the symbol. I wonder if that was a symbol thing, from Prince.
Like Prince.
So, Stanley Consulting as well as my personal one. They're both, nothing crazy. Just, something that will, I like to leave thought-provoking posts and things like that. We post regularly, and I'm always willing to, assist and come on your podcast. I really appreciate the opportunity. But yes, that's how folks can reach me.
Wonderful. Well, Jermaine, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. We'll have to have you back on to say, okay, let's see what's going on now in this space, because it's going to, I'm sure, continue to keep us on our toes.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. And everyone, thank you for tuning in to this episode. Hopefully you are thinking of ways that you can sneak in the DEI vegetables or do the work without saying the words, because this work is going to continue to happen. Please be sure to tune in every Tuesday at 5:15 p.m. Eastern, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your podcast. And until next time, have a good one.